Welcome. I'm Gwen Shamlin, General Counsel to the East Baton Rouge Parish School System and to the school board. We'd like to thank you for your interest in our superintendent's position with the school system. The board members present will now introduce themselves by telling you their names, their profession, and how many years they served on the board. I'll turn it over to board members to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Bellue.
Dr. Towns, welcome. I'm Mark Bellue. I've been on the board approximately 6 years, and this is my second superintendent search. We're excited that we've had such qualified candidates and a lot of interest in the position. So we're looking forward to learning more about you today.
Mr. Howard.
Good evening, Dr. Towns. I'm Tramelle Howard, currently serve as the Vice President of the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board. This is my second year on the board. I'm excited to hear more and learn more about you as you seek interest in our position, and we look forward to speaking to you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ware-Jackson.
Good afternoon. So delighted to be here. I'm Evelyn Ware-Jackson. This is my 10th year in service. I'm a past president from a couple of years ago, and I work in the area of community and economic development.
Ms. Bernard.
Good afternoon, Dr. Towne. I'm Connie Bernard. I've been on the board for 10 years also, and I work in public relations and communications. I've been on the, did I say 10 years? Yeah.
All right, as a matter of record keeping, we will try to keep questions and answers to an average of about 4 minutes apiece. To kick things off, we'd briefly like to hear from you, Dr. Towns, about your career and the things that you feel it's important for us to know about you.
Thank you. Distinguished members of the board, it is an honor to be here with you today as a candidate to become the next superintendent of East Baton Rouge Parish School System. I have been impressed with the board and the community as you all have banded together during these unprecedented times to support students and their families. Who would have thought when we began this process that we would be responding to a global pandemic in terms of the novel coronavirus? Yet here we are in this virtual interview, adjusting to our new reality. Indeed, public servants rise to the occasion during a crisis to make sure that children are fed, families are safe, and that our teams are reassured. As I have followed your activities over the past several weeks in East Baton Rouge, it is clear to me that you are a resilient community where people care about one another. As I reflect on the path that has led me to this place today, that same sense of service and care is at the core. I know that many sacrificed along the way to make sure that I would have great opportunities available to me. And those to whom much is given, much is required. My family hails from rural South Georgia, a small town called Lilly in Dooley County. My mother was the first in our family to earn her high school diploma and the first to go to college. I was born when my mother was a 19-year-old unmarried sophomore. And my grandmother, who had recently been widowed just months before my birth, committed to take care of me so that my mother could finish her degree. And my grandmother made this sacrifice, even though she was raising my mother's 10 younger siblings on her own. My mother did finish college and became a social worker. As I began kindergarten, we had moved to Athens, Georgia, so that my mother could earn a master's in social work from the University of Georgia. And I had never had any formal daycare or pre-K. So as I started school, they saw that I had a language development issue and they assigned me to a speech therapist. And even though I had this language issue, my mom, like so many moms, felt that I was very bright and she wanted the school to challenge me more academically. Her advocacy went largely ignored, so she began to look for other options for me. She learned that the best school was across town and outside of our attendance zone. But my mom used a coworker's address to get me into that school, Oglethorpe Elementary, at the start of my 2nd grade year. And in this new school, I flourished. My 2nd grade teacher, Miss Tramelle Smith, must have not looked at my old school records because by December of that year, she had recommended me for the gifted program. And then my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Gardner, helped me to accelerate through the curriculum and ultimately recommended that I skip the 4th grade. So in 2 years, with 2 highly effective teachers who saw the same potential in me that my mom saw, I had gone from a kid labeled with a speech delay to being accepted into the gifted program to skipping a grade. And I know that Miss Tramelle Smith, Miss Gardner, and Oglethorpe Elementary were turning points in my life that set me on a trajectory that led to an engineering degree and an MBA from Duke, a doctorate from Vanderbilt, and most importantly, opened up a world of opportunities to me. And I strongly believe that every child deserves a world of opportunities open to them. That early foundation planted a seed in me that only grew as I began my career in the private sector, starting in technology and then banking. I have deep experience in finance, advancing in positions over 10 years, working for companies that were Fortune 500 companies, completing transactions worth billions of dollars. I moved from investment banking to commercial lending, supporting small businesses to grow local economies, and building relationships to drive broader economic development, such as those with chambers of commerce and small business development centers. That experience has served me well in helping to craft budgets and strategically allocate resources for the large public school districts in which I have worked. Moreover, my private sector experience has focused my commitment to accountability and results as central to my leadership style. I have a unique perspective and set of skills that distinguishes me for this superintendent role. Over the past 10 years, I have served in the executive cabinet of both state and local education agencies, and I have a proven track record of raising the bar for all kids, narrowing achievement gaps, increasing graduation rates, and improving post-secondary readiness. As Chief Accountability Officer in Knox County, our team led the district to achieve a 90% graduation rate, earn straight A's in achievement on the state report card, and become the only large urban district in history to earn exemplary status, the state's top accountability designation. I was appointed as Assistant Commissioner at the Tennessee Department of Education, where our team launched the next generation of assessments, and we redesigned the state's accountability system and school improvement framework, which was included in our highly regarded state plan for the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. I am currently the Chief of Staff in Hamilton County Schools, where I serve as the superintendent's designee, representing him in all major facets of the district and acting as superintendent in his absence. In Hamilton County, we have proven ourselves to be the fastest improving district in Tennessee. In 2019, we were the second ranked district for student academic growth, improving from a ranking of 130th out of 146 districts in 2017. We had 45 schools that earned the top rating for student academic growth, and we had 32 schools that were reward schools or an A grade on the state report card. These experiences are clear evidence that I can build and lead great teams who transform districts to raise student achievement. I sincerely believe that every child deserves the best possible opportunity to reach his or her full potential. And this is only possible through a high-quality public education system, which is the cornerstone of strong communities, thriving economies, and an enduring democracy. My life's path to this interview and my experience as an instructional leader and businesswoman will help me to guide the students of East Baton Rouge to an even brighter future. I would be thrilled and humbled to serve in this leadership role and to join with the community to set a vision and strategic direction that dramatically improves outcomes and opportunities for all children in East Baton Rouge Parish school system. Thank you.
Mr. Shamlin, your mic's off.
Yes, I caught that. Thank you, Dr. Towns. We'll now move into questions from the board. Board Member Bellue will be first.
Thank you.
Dr. Towns, obviously you're keen on seeing children learn. Can you tell us what your beliefs on how children learn and how they reach their full potential?
Absolutely. At the core of my beliefs is that all children can learn and all children can succeed. But different children need different things. And to me, this is the very definition of educational equity. We have to make sure that every child gets what he or she needs to reach their full potential. And so that means that we have to not only pay keen attention to teaching and learning, and that means that every student gets access to grade level curriculum to meet the state expectations and state standards, but as well that we have a full complement of wraparound supports that really speak to the individual needs of that child. We have students who are identified with learning disabilities and special needs. We have students that are English language learners and need support with that. We have students that are living in poverty, and so they have families where their basic needs cannot be met. And we know that children are not going to be able to engage in academic content if they're worried about being hungry, if they're ill, if their vision isn't well so that they can see what's happening in the classroom. So we have to attend to the whole child, to the whole person, to make sure that we can meet those full academic needs. So in sum, I believe that every child can achieve at high levels, but every child needs a different set of resources to be able to reach that full potential, given the opportunity to receive grade level work, grade level curriculum, a highly effective educator in their classroom, a world-class learning environment. Then we can see all children succeed in East Baton Rouge.
Thank you. The next question, why do you want to be our superintendent, and what specific things about this position do you find most attractive?
Yes, I think, first of all, I have a real strong sense of service. I am in public education because I have always had this strong will to give back. You all heard my personal story. My mom is a social worker, so I've been surrounded by public servants my entire life. And so I see this opportunity as one to be able to make a difference and have an impact on a large group of children, 41,000 children that are a part of East Baton Rouge Parish school system. This particular role is attractive to me because I see the opportunity, the potential that is available in East Baton Rouge. There is so much untapped potential amongst the students and families in East Baton Rouge Parish. So I'm really attracted to situations where I can help something be better, where people want it to be better. I have a strong sense of trying to reach excellence, and this seems like this community also wants to be excellent. So when I look at the landscape in East Baton Rouge Parish and the way that you all are talking about public education, the way that so many community stakeholders are really invested in seeing this school district improve, that's a place that I want to be, where the community is invested in public education, where everybody wants to work together to see all children reach their highest academic potential, and where I can serve and be a part of that mandate, of that mission with the community. And so East Baton Rouge is in a wonderful place. Of course, there are challenges, but I often seek out challenges. And it's one of the things that really for me is my mission quotient and my belief system, that I want to be able to help students and families reach their full goals and potential. And in a community like East Baton Rouge, I think that that's possible, and I want to be a part of it.
Thank you. I'll move to the next question. It's a little long, so if you need me to repeat any part of it, just let me know. Mm-hmm. Given the population distribution of our city, the demographics of our current student population, the existing charter school landscape, and the relatively large number of private and parochial students, what would be your initial view of the ideal EBR public school system in 5 years?
So I just want to make sure I heard all the components. I was taking a few notes, but you said population demographics, the demographics of the school systems, the charter landscape, as well as the private and parochial schools. What would be the ideal East Baton Rouge Parish school system in 5 years? Right,
and the first one was the population distribution in terms of where where the most people are located within the city and what parts of the city are growing most rapidly.
So when you talk about the ideal for East Baton Rouge, I had an opportunity to look at the 2013 strategic plan that you all had adopted. And the bold goal there was to be a top 10 school district in Louisiana. And I looked at the most recent results, and I think that the rankings for East Baton Rouge are somewhere in the 50s, in the mid 50s. And so I would say, ideally, in 5 years, East Baton Rouge is going to be a school system that is on the rise, a school system where instead of being in the bottom half of 71 school districts, that we find ourselves at least in the top half on our way to hitting that top 10 bold goal that the community has had. When you look at the landscape of students and where families are currently choosing to send their children, and it seems like there are all kinds of options that families are choosing, I want to make sure that all of the LEA-run schools, all of the traditional public schools, the open enrollment schools are right there in the mix as top competitors. I have said here in Hamilton County, and I would say the same thing in East Baton Rouge Parish, we want to be the first choice for families. We want our schools to be the first choice for families. And certainly there will be families that make different choices based on their religious beliefs or based on some interest or particular specific need of their child. But we want the first choice, the first option, to be district schools. And so in my mind, in 5 years, East Baton Rouge is going to be a school system where parents are looking at us as that first choice, that they see us as a trusted and reliable partner to provide a high quality education for their child, and that when we look at the demographics of the school system, and right now we're at about 42,000 students, we would see more and more families choosing to be a part of East Baton Rouge Parish school system. So we would be on a trajectory of growth in terms of enrollment. We would be on a trajectory of increased student achievement. We would see ourselves rising in the rankings, and that we would see all of these things being the fruits of the team, of the administration, the school board, and the community working together to make those things a reality.
All right, well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Towns. We'll now go to Board Member Howard.
Good evening, Dr. Towns. Thank you again. So I'll just go right into my question.
Mm-hmm.
Equity is a widely used word in the educational arena. What is your view on equity as it applies to the public school system, and how do you get people to buy into that vision?
Yes, so I had mentioned that first, I think we all need a working definition of equity. And for me, my working definition of equity is that every child gets what he or she needs to reach his or her full academic and social emotional potential. And so what that means that we've got to equitably allocate resources in order to meet the needs, the varying needs of students. So when I think about the East Baton Rouge landscape, and I've looked at some of the budget documents and staffing documents, the first thing that I've tried to do in the districts that I've worked in is make sure that we are equitably distributing resources. So for example, making sure that there's a base staffing model that actually considers poverty, and that when you have students who are living in poverty, there are more demands on the teachers to try to meet those needs of students outside of the classrooms. So that may mean that you need a smaller teacher to pupil ratio in schools that have high poverty. When I reviewed the elementary school distribution of staffing for base teachers, I looked at the schools that were above 75% economically disadvantaged, free and reduced lunch, and that teacher to pupil ratio was about 1 to 19. When I looked at the schools that were below 75%, that teacher to pupil ratio was about 15. And so I wonder, are we making intentional decisions to make sure that we resource the schools with the greatest needs, such that we are able to have children have the supports and be able to meet them where they are in order to see them accelerate their academic achievement. So equity is a tough conversation because a lot of people like to focus on equal, and they think about, oh, is everyone getting the same thing? Well, it's been said, we don't all need a cast if we don't all have a broken leg. So we can't make sure that everybody gets the same thing. We have to make sure that people get what they need, that children get what they need to be successful. And so that's the conversation that I believe that needs to occur in the East Baton Rouge Parish school system as we think about how can we improve outcomes for all students? How can we make sure that every child has access to a high quality seat where there's an effective teacher who is able to offer them grade level curriculum that challenges them to meet the rigorous standards of Louisiana. If you were speaking, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Sorry about that. So my next question is, the academic achievement of our students is our main focus. Would you please give us some examples of how you've helped improve academic performance in your career? Also, how might you go about improving scores in East Baton Rouge, monitoring progress, and highlighting areas in need of improvement? If you need me to repeat any components, please let me know.
Please just repeat the whole question. I just want to take a couple of notes to make sure I hit it all. Thank you.
Absolutely. The academic achievement of our students is our main focus. Would you please give us some examples of how you've helped improve academic performance in your career? Also, how might you go about improving scores in East Baton Rouge Parish schools, monitoring progress, and highlight areas in need of improvement?
Great. So, first and foremost, I think that it's important to acknowledge that the biggest in-school factor on student achievement is the teacher. And so therefore, I've spent the last decade in public education really making sure that my work supports the work of teachers, supports effective instructional practice, and provides teachers with the resources that they need to help improve student outcomes. So some examples of that, I started in Knox County in human capital. And so I was helping with implementing a professional developmental evaluation system where we had a clear definition of what is effective teaching practice, and that teachers would receive regular high quality feedback on their practice and be able to improve on instruction based on that clear definition of effective instruction. It's important to make sure that we attract and retain high quality teachers. So I've been involved in making sure that teachers get competitive compensation and that we have differentiated compensation for teachers who are high performing and who take on tough assignments. In addition, I've made sure that teachers have the right kinds of resources for instruction and intervention. That means making sure that we purchase high quality curriculum so that teachers have the tools that they need in their toolbox to effectively deliver instruction to students. Making sure that we have high quality intervention programs so that we're able to address those specific learning needs of our struggling students, particularly our struggling readers. And then it's about making sure that teachers don't have to do it all by themselves. It's important that we put additional resources in schools to help support teachers with those social emotional needs of students. So in my work here in Hamilton County, I have made sure that we provide additional resources around counselors, social workers, attendance specialists, so that teachers don't have to wear all those hats and that they can focus on the job at hand, which is teaching and learning. In Hamilton County, we've become a part of the By All Means Consortium with the Harvard School of Education. And By All Means is focused on making sure that there are wraparound supports and that we have student success planning that looks at both the academic and non-academic needs of students, and that we match resources to those non-academic needs so that we can remove the barriers to academic success for students. In addition to all of the things that I've talked about in terms of making sure that we have effective instructional practice with our educators and that we're supporting our educators, it's important to have an effective leader. Teachers want to work for someone who leads a school in the direction that aligns with their values and their goals and their mission to help students be successful. So I have worked in leadership development programs to recruit top talent in terms of principals and to make sure that those highly effective principals attract highly effective teachers and support highly effective teachers in those schools. So all of those things I think are directly attributable to student achievement, and those would be the kinds of things that I would work on inside of East Baton Rouge. In terms of monitoring progress, I think it's really important that we make sure that we're measuring what it is that students are expected to be able to know and do at each grade level. It's been my experience in all the classrooms and all the schools that I have gone into that there are wide variations in terms of what students are learning. And I often say it's not always about what the teacher is doing. Look at what the students are doing. What is the task? What is the curriculum? What are we challenging students with? Are we making sure that there's a level of rigor there? There was a recent report called the opportunity myth, where there was a shocking percentage of students who were never getting exposed to grade level work. And so part of monitoring progress in East Baton Rouge is ensuring that we have a guaranteed viable curriculum that's in every one of our schools, and that we're giving every student the best possible opportunity to meet those grade level expectations. When it comes to monitoring student mastery towards the standards, progress of student mastery towards the standards, I think it's important to make sure that we have a benchmarking tool where we're able to compare across all schools, across student groups, to make sure that we aren't letting any child fall through the crack, and that we're able to, most importantly, support schools where it seems like there's a challenge with being able to help students reach those high academic standards. Here in Hamilton County, we implemented a benchmark program in 2018 after I joined the district. We provide that benchmark 3 times a year, and it's been incredible in terms of teacher feedback on the type of information that they get with regard to where the students' skill deficits are, where they need to close gaps, and where they've been successful. Teachers use it as a pre-assessment tool to figure out, okay, maybe I don't need to spend as much time on this standard in the curriculum as I do on this standard when students are struggling. And it gives us the opportunity to be able to remediate and progress monitor across the board in the district. Data systems are extremely important. We've built a robust data warehouse inside of Hamilton County where every teacher has the ability to look at a dashboard that sees their roster of students, how they've performed historically on state assessments, how they've been doing on benchmarks, what their report card grades look like, what their attendance looks like, all in one place, because teachers don't have time to go and look in multiple different systems to try to find information about their kids. And the better teacher knowledge of students, the better they can support those students to high academic learning. So I think that those are just a few things that I think about when I think about raising student achievement in East Baton Rouge Parish and being able to monitor student progress towards those achievement goals.
Thank you for that response. Now moving to my last question. It is, how would you foster the academic achievement of students with special needs, disabilities, ELL students, alternative students, gifted and talented students, and students attending magnet programs while maintaining equity across all student groups? Again, if you need me to repeat any of that, I can.
No, I think I got it. So I think that as a district administrator, it's important that we are looking at all of our children and all of the different needs and talents of our students across the spectrum. In Hamilton County, we do have a chief equity officer where all the focus on those various student groups that you named, our students with special needs, our students who are English language learners, we organize around a particular division where there is a focus on making sure that we're aligning resources to be able to support those students. 2 things are extremely important when it comes to making sure that gifted and talented students, students with special needs, English language learners, that they're all getting what they need to be successful. We need to make sure that they, first of all, have access to grade level work and have as much opportunity as possible to be with their peers, and that we then provide additional supports and services to meet the particular needs of those students. When that means acceleration for our gifted and talented students, we give them opportunity to accelerate through the curriculum. We give them opportunities to be exposed to more rigorous content. When it comes to our students with special needs, we're going to make sure that we have inclusive educational settings for our students and that we don't see special education as a place. It is a service, which means that students are still getting access to that grade level content, and that most importantly across all of that, we have shared ownership and accountability for the results of those students. We don't, in our district, let it be said that, oh, those are special eds kids. Oh, that's ESL's kids. No, they're all of our kids, which means that even though we have educators that have particular skill sets and specialization around those student groups, even the general education teacher partners with them to make sure that there is a team responsibility and a team view for making sure that that child is successful. So for me, focusing on all of those different student groups is the very definition of maintaining equity. In fact, it should not be in a conflict to say that we're supporting the needs of all students, yet upholding the high standards of our magnet programs, as well as making sure that we focus on the needs of our students with IEPs, individual education plans, making sure that we're helping our English learners gain those English skills, making sure that our gifted and talented students are being pushed to further achieve beyond the current academic level that they're in. So I don't see those things in conflict. I see that as the very definition of equity, making sure that every child gets what he or she needs to be successful.
Thank you, Dr. Towns. We will now go to Board Member Ware-Jackson.
Okay. Dr. Towns, I have a couple of questions. The first one's regarding community. You know, community input and trust is vitally important to our success. How would you go about getting that input and building community trust in a vision for the future? And also, many decisions that have to be made are difficult. How would you work with the community on unpopular issues?
Yes, no, great question. First of all, I think it's important that we understand as public servants, you all as elected school board members and myself working in district administration, that education is a public good. So it is urgent that we have community input and feedback around the work that we're doing, and in particular when you think about the fact that taxpayer dollars support our efforts. So we absolutely have to show deference to the needs and wants of our community and seek their feedback as we move forward. There's an old proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And so that's the way that I look at community involvement and input. In my experience, in all the roles I've had over the past decade, there's been extensive community engagement because so much of this has been around change and, as you know, difficult change in some regards. And so when I was in Knox County, when we were rolling out an annual teacher evaluation system and a new accountability framework, I hosted community town halls, teacher focus groups, student focus groups to get feedback on where we were going and hear what people's concerns were so that those concerns could be part of an implementation plan. You don't want to get so far down the road and everybody's upset with you, and yet you haven't talked to them on the front end about what the plans are. And when we've had that kind of community feedback, we make sure that it's a 360 view. We're involving everybody who has any interest in the school district, and frankly, that's all of our community. When I think about difficult conversations that have had to be had, one of the really hot topics here in Tennessee is around school turnaround and school improvement. In Tennessee, we have an achievement school district similar to your recovery school district in Louisiana. And it certainly has not been without controversy when there is the state taking what many see as an extreme intervention in terms of school takeover for turnaround purposes. And when I was at the State Department of Education as an assistant commissioner, we began thinking about what is a third way? Is there a way that we can partner with communities that maintain local control, that keep shared ownership and accountability for the improvement of schools? And we came up with a third way that we called the partnership network. And that was really born out of going as the State Department into the community, which actually it was Chattanooga and Hamilton County, and talking to folks about how could we engage the community to help support schools and not think about putting them in the achievement school district, but figuring out how can the local community help to turn around. And one of the options that came out of that was the shared governance model, the partnership network, where the community said, appoint community members to be on an advisory council to help oversee those schools and to help be engaged in making sure that the schools get the resources, connecting with parents to make sure that they know what the goals are and that they're supporting students to high level of learning. So I was on the state side when we were gathering feedback when the idea was born for the partnership network. And then I moved into the chief of staff role here in Hamilton County on the other side, now supporting the partnership network, which we did stand up with an advisory council that has 4 members appointed by the state, 3 members appointed by us in the district, public meetings with those community leaders, helping us to identify what the specific needs and attributes and resources are that we need to have to improve those schools. So that was a difficult conversation that turned into a productive problem-solving session that created a third way, a new model for shared governance around school turnaround. In East Baton Rouge Parish, there are certainly going to be some difficult conversations that have to be had. You all are looking at the challenges. I was reading through your audit and some of the management comments about where you are with fund balance and resources, conversations around school facilities and utilization, capacity and utilization of school facilities, much conversation around charters, magnets, open enrollment school models. And I think that the important part is to be proactive and to be constantly communicating. Don't just go to the community when there's a problem. Keep the community engaged all the time. So this means having advisory councils that span the geographic areas across East Baton Rouge Parish, getting regular feedback, monthly basis, bi-weekly basis from the community, hearing from them in advance what the concerns and what the needs are. And this goes for anything like zoning, redistricting, you know, also a third rail of public education, but you have to be out in front of people, talking to them all the time. That's how you build trust. That's how people are sure that they're being heard. And I think that we have to treat the community as partners in the work that we're doing. It's shared power, not empower, it's shared power. Nothing that we do is that we're able to do can be done without the support of the community. So recognizing that, I think, gives us the opportunity to build that stronger trust relationship with transparency and regular communication.
Thank you. Here's my next question. Now, the ability to recruit, employ, and retain effective personnel is a critical need. As you look to assemble a management team, what are the key traits and experiences you want your team to embody? And how do you ensure that you have a wide and diverse talent pool when selecting personnel?
So when I think about an effective management team and the traits and experiences that I would be looking for, at the top of mind for me are people who have shown a commitment to excellence in their history. And that means that there is tangible evidence of the impact that they have made, the results that they have gotten, and the fact that they are consistently pursuing excellence. I once heard somebody say, and I love this, how you do anything is how you do everything. How you do anything is how you do everything. And so you can see evidence of someone who's consistently committed to excellence versus someone who is not consistently committed to such. So I'm looking for a high bar of expectations and professionalism around the team. I want to build a team that has true diversity, and I mean diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, diversity of experience, diversity of gender, diversity of race, diversity of age. I want a team that represents the community that we serve, which is a cross section of people. And that way you don't have blind spots in terms of where people are coming from with their life experience. I want folks at the table who are representative of the community that we serve. And so I'd be looking to try to make sure that I attract a diverse team by casting the net wide. So many times you don't get the diversity that you need because people just only look into their own networks. Now, I have a great network. but my network is limited by the person that I am and the experiences that I've had. So I want to make sure that I'm going into other networks and connecting with other resources and avenues to identify talent. When we think about that wide and diverse talent, this last part of your question, and how do we go and recruit that? I think that people want to work for institutions and organizations that have shown themselves being committed to excellence, being committed to performance, and who have clearly articulated what their goals and values are. So frankly, I think the first step in making sure that you attract talent and excellence is working together with you all as the school board to build that new strategic plan, to build off of the statement of principles that you all have put together so that we can clearly demonstrate to any talent pool, this is what we're about. And if you're about this, then you need to come be a part of this team because this is the work that we're going to accomplish.
Great. Okay.
Excuse me, Ms. Ware-Jackson. I wanted to jump in and say we have approximately 45 minutes left and about 10 questions. Just to kind of keep everyone paced, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, last question. Could you please tell us about your philosophy on managing people and what you do, and what do routine interactions with principals, teachers, and other staff look like? How do you deal with conflict either with you or between subordinates?
So my philosophy on managing people is that I always think about the best and the worst boss that I ever had. And I don't want to be my worst boss. I'd rather model myself after my best boss. And what I really think that most people are looking for is a manager who really supports them, supports their work, and trusts them to do their work. So in my mind, what I try to do as a manager is define the what, which is the goal, and then leave the team to determine the how. And I think that's important for principals as well. Define the goal and give people the autonomy to determine the how. Now, I like to say defined autonomy or earned autonomy. And this means that I'm going to be looking for guardrails around what is the performance. When you're performing, meeting the goals, then there's not going to be as much scrutiny around the how. But frankly, autonomy is earned. And when there become challenges with being able to meet the expectations and the goals, that means that there's going to be a shift in terms of what scrutiny there is and questions there are around the processes and the how of getting there. So I think that you define that and say to people up front that there is an expectation that there is performance along with autonomy. I also think that it's very important in my leadership style is that you give feedback all along the way. I like formalized performance management. I've been in districts where there was no formal tool to give feedback to principals, central office administrators, and it is always my goal to go into a situation and make sure everyone is clear on what the performance management expectations are. And so if you're giving feedback along the way, there's no surprises to any direct report in terms of if there might need to be a difficult conversation, that conflict that you mentioned. So I like to be proactive in giving feedback, and I recognize a framework that's situational leadership. Some of the folks that you manage, you really have to support and coach through. Some you can just delegate to because they're very senior, they've proven themselves. Other times you have to be very directive. They are junior, they might not have the competency and skills, so you have to be highly directive and be very explicit in what the expectations are. And sometimes you're really just being more supportive. You have someone who has the skill and you're just encouraging along the way and engaging when they ask you. So I think that those are the leadership frames that you can't treat every subordinate the same, that you need to make sure that you're engaging with people on a regular basis to give them feedback. When it comes to principals and central office administrators, I really want to see the work of principals. I like being in schools, seeing what they're experiencing, what their kids need, what the environment and the context is like. So I certainly don't think that you're in a position to give feedback when you've never set foot in someone's building, right? So you need to make sure that you're visible, engaged, and making opportunities to be able to see the principal's school and be able to engage with teachers and children in that school context. So I think that that really is my leadership philosophy, where you're engaging proactively around giving feedback, that you're differentiating between direct reports. And when it comes to managing conflict, I'm very direct. I think that that's the best way to be. I was reading a book recently, Brene Brown, and the refrain is clear is kind. Clear is kind. And if you're clear with someone, then you can avoid confusion. And even though the conversation may be difficult, I think that many people respect the fact that when you're direct and give specific feedback, don't dance around the bush and don't talk to other people about it. Go directly to the source. And that's the kind of leader that I am, that I like to go directly to someone, really confront the issue. And then that means that we can work to problem solve. And so that's how I like to handle conflict. And when two employees bring me conflict, I'm going to try to first say, is there a way for you to mediate with that person directly? And if there's a breakdown, then I can become the third party mediator. But I want to give professionals the opportunity to resolve their own conflicts first before I get involved to mediate.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Shamlin?
Thank you. We will now go to Board Member Bernard.
Good evening, Dr. Towne. Effective principals are key in improving school performance. What do you look for in recruiting or promoting new principals, and what performance expectations do you have for your principals?
So I think that, as I mentioned when we were talking about a leadership team, I'm going to look for principals who have a history and a record of excellence. I'm going to look at the work that they have done previously. If they've been in school leadership before, I'm going to look at the results of that school, and I'm going to talk to the educators that have worked for that principal and parents that have engaged with them. I think that principals really need to be focused on instructional leadership to be successful. And the key tenets of instructional leadership, frankly, is shared ownership and accountability, distributed leadership. Principals who are able to build effective leadership teams in their building, where you see evidence of teacher leadership. You see teachers who are actually helping to set the goals and direction of the school, who are running collaborative planning and PLC processes, who are actually seen as partners in the work with that principal. I think that it's a red flag if you see a principal who does it all himself or herself. There's no way that you can have an effective school without involving all of the educators. And frankly, that's deferring to expertise. The educators themselves, the teachers in the classroom, are most knowledgeable about the work that needs to get done. But at the same time, that principal is making sure they set clear goals and have a clear direction defined, a school action plan or improvement plan that all the staff is aware of, that they have a formal process to make sure that they engage parents, they welcome parents into the building, and they see parents as partners in the education, and that there's evidence of that the principal has had, and that it's a principal who is clearly aligned with the mission and vision and values of the district. So you don't ever want to find someone who really doesn't necessarily agree with the goals and the values as the district has defined them. You want people who can align to the work, believe in the work, and be able to move forward the ultimate district vision and mission. So I would be looking for principals who show that alignment, who actually can buy into the work that we have set forth and defined for EBR.
Thank you, Dr. Towne. The next question is, how would you ensure staffing equity in terms of quantity and quality between school sites and the various types of student populations?
So this is a great question. I think that it's a very big challenge that most districts face. If you look at the distribution of teaching talent, and then I call it the teacher labor market, first of all, and I studied about this in my graduate program, teachers tend to look for opportunities that are near where they live. So you have to think about where the distribution of talent is. And when you have some schools that are underserved, in many circumstances, teachers don't live in those communities. The people that we're trying to attract don't live in those communities. So you have to think about then, what is the basket of goods to be able to make sure that I can entice somebody to have a longer commute, to be able to go to a community that may not be in the same place that they pick up their child from daycare or from their school that they may be zoned for. And so you have to really consider, what are the working conditions? What's the working environment at all of the schools? And what are the intangible differences that attract talent into a building? And how can you ensure that in all of your schools, teachers see a working condition and learning environment that's one that they want to be a part of? And I really think that it's important to acknowledge that there are schools and that there are roles that are more difficult in terms of the demands of the job. We've talked about when students are living in poverty, there is more that you need to do as an educator to be able to help remove those academic barriers as those basic needs that students come to school with. There are situations where when we think about the limits on talent in terms of the supply, we don't have enough math and science teachers for high school. We don't have enough special educators. We don't have enough foreign language teachers. So you have to start thinking about, what are these market distinctions that make some of the jobs that we have, frankly, more difficult to find talent. And this is where I think we have to consider, what is the differentiated compensation? How do we make sure that we level out the market to attract the talent that we need, based on acknowledging that there are market differences and different demands of the positions? And that's a hard conversation to have. And historically in education, we haven't done that. But I do think that we're in a reality where, as more teachers retire and we're more challenged to attract folks to the profession, we have to start thinking differently about how we have defined compensation and defined the teaching roles. So when I think about quality, it's about making sure that we attract educators by differentiating among what the types of opportunities that we have, and potentially differentiating the compensation to reflect that. When I think about quality, the quantity of educators by each school, this goes back to the staffing model, or a student-based funding model that I mentioned earlier. We have to make sure that we have some rationale for how we staff schools, and that is connected to the demographics of the student population being served. And then we have to be systematic about it and disciplined about it to make sure that we are getting the number of personnel that we need in order to help a school be successful based on the demographics and population that they serve. So that's how I would make sure we have the quantity of allocation correctly done to meet our goals around equity in a district, and to make sure that every child is getting what he or she needs to be successful.
Thank you, Dr. Towne. What is your view of the roles and responsibilities of the East Baton Rouge School Board, and how would you work to build a working and trusting relationship with the board?
Yes, so I think that key to any high-performing school district is a strong governance model, and governance is shared between you all as the elected school board and the superintendent as your only employee. And so the first thing that I want to make sure is that I understand what each of you all needs and what your priorities are based on the constituencies that have elected you to the school board. I think it's a wonderful thing when we consider our American democracy and representative government. So first and foremost, I know that school board members have to meet the needs of those who have elected them. And so it will be my charge to make sure that I understand from each of you, what are the key concerns of your districts and of the people that you represent. And then as your employee, I think it's my job to go back to senior administration and try to develop options and recommendations that reflect a consensus that can meet needs across the constituencies that you serve, and give you all options that allow you to come to consensus. And I think that being able to bring a set of recommendations where we've internalized all the differing needs and expectations of the different districts and communities that we serve is a way to help make sure that the school district, the school board, that you all are meeting the needs of constituents. In terms of the relationship and building building trust with the school board. I want to make sure that we have regular communication. As your employee, I would make sure that we have individual meetings where you are able to sit down with me formally on a weekly basis or reach out by phone and just touch base, stay in regular communication. I think it's my job as superintendent to make sure that there are no surprises. I'm going to proactively communicate with you whenever there is a concern or issue in the district so that you hear it from me first and not from any media source or somewhere else, right? So I'm going to be proactively communicating. And I think that it's helpful, and I would be working with the school board to make sure that you all define clearly for me, what are the goals? What are the expectations? How will you be measuring my performance? So that way I can meet your expectations. So I think all of those things are important to building a productive relationship between the board and being able to meet you all in terms of the roles and responsibilities that you have for governance, and in particular around budget, and making sure that we're developing the budget together based on your priorities, and that we're setting strategic plan goals and priorities with the school board.
Thank you, Dr. Towne. One more question. The need to handle budgets and financial issues. This is integral to the superintendent's success. Can you tell us how you were prepared to handle that challenge?
So I strongly believe that budgets are a statement of our values. And so if a budget is going to reflect our values, first we need to be clear on what those values are. And from there, we can really implement what I call priority-based budgeting. In all of my experiences, I'm very familiar with working with budgets, large budgets, finances, and spreadsheets and the like. But I think what makes the difference in terms of working in a public school district is that we have to stop thinking about our budgets as a roll forward document, as opposed to a plan, a spending plan that aligns with our strategic priorities. And so priority-based budgeting means that we've defined what the goals are, and in any given year, we're looking at the entire budget and saying what's meeting the needs, what's aligning to our goals, and what isn't. When I was in Knox County, we had a really robust return on investment process where we did program evaluation, and we looked at our instructional resources and figured out, were we getting the results for kids that we expected? And if we didn't get those results, then we had a decision to make about continuing the investment or refining the practice, right? It wasn't just oh, we're going to do the same thing last year plus whatever additional revenue that we get. I think it's important to understand that in a school budget, a district budget, that 80% of the budget is salary and benefits. It's people, right? And that 90 to 95% of that is going to be school-based. So when you consider that we're a people business, you have to really think about where are the opportunities when you're prioritizing keeping as many dollars as close to the classroom and to where student learning is happening. So I would be looking at, first of all, making sure we have operational efficiencies, looking at things like transportation. I noticed that your bus fleet has over 500 buses. We have a similar number of students in Hamilton County, and we have about 350 buses. So those are things that I would be looking at to see, are there any opportunities to be more efficient in our routes? Looking at things like maintenance, maintenance services, looking at facilities overhead. Those are the places that are not, directly connected to the classroom, but keeps us from being able to invest more into the classroom. And then trying to make sure that we are really scrubbing and looking at how we allocate resources to schools, as we've talked about. And when you have that priority-based budgeting and alignment, it's really the practices that I learned about doing the Smarter School Spending Project in connection with the Council of Great City Schools, where it was really a clear focus on looking at all the opportunities that we have in the budget to be able to make sure that we're correctly prioritizing and that we're forecasting. Again, no surprises. You want to have a 3-year view at any given time of where you expect revenues to be and what are going to be big impacts on your expenditures, and how you're aligning to your strategic plan goals. And so what are you trying to invest in? So that way you always have a proactive outlook in terms of what's happening with the budget.
Thank you, Dr. Towne. Mr. Shamlin's up next.
Thank you. Each board member was given the opportunity to ask one question of choice. 5 questions were submitted. Mr. Guerrero will keep track of time remaining to make sure each question can be fully addressed. Board Member Bellue will lead off.
Thank you. Dr. Towns, I know innovation, the term innovation is used frequently in education circles. And can you provide an example of an innovative idea that showed promise but failed to live up to expectations and improved student achievement compared to more traditional methods? And also provide us an example of an innovative idea or technology that has the potential to significantly improve student achievement.
So that's great questions, both. So when you say an example of an innovation that failed, do you mean that I know about in the education landscape, or something that I myself was trying to launch?
I would say just anything that comes to mind.
Okay, great. So I think that definitely, there's been a lot of work over the past decade in terms of trying to experiment with different ideas around how to improve schools. One such idea, I think there was a lot of conversation around what I'll call the small school project, and being able to really focus on small learning communities, or creating smaller school units themselves, and whether or not that would have a positive impact on student achievement. And though it was a great idea, because when people think about smaller class sizes, then you wanted to extend it to say, oh, well, if we create just smaller learning communities, then we should be able to see, similar results. And in fact, there was no empirical evidence after, nearly a decade of study around the small school effect or small learning communities making the difference. It is, in fact, that unit, the teacher being connected to the classroom and the students in that classroom, that smaller class size that seemed to drive student outcomes and results. So I think that that was an innovation and experiment that really proved not to have the impact on student achievement that we had hoped. When it comes to innovative ideas and what I think can really help accelerate student achievement, I think that we're in a time where technology should help us with personalization. I believe that if we are able to use more computer adaptive technology that meets students where they are and actually adjust and change as the student learning trajectory adjusts and change, that will help accelerate student achievement. And computer adaptive technology has really gotten better over the last decade. And I think it's something that's still technology is underutilized as a blended resource in our schools. And frankly, as I've engaged with students and had student focus groups, one of the most profound things a student ever said to me was, we come to school and we don't get it. You guys hand us paper, like we don't do paper, we're on our phones, we're on our computers. And it struck me that we are serving digital natives and we're asking them to step into analog environments. And even though we've done a better job of equipping classrooms with computers, I know you all in East Baton Rouge have over 30,000 laptop devices that students have access to. What we haven't done is taken the next step and create a truly blended learning environment where that technology is fully integrated and that we're using it to give that student a personalized education experience that meets their particular skills and deficits, as well as their strengths and interests. So it's really about computer adaptive technology and student personalization. I think that has the greatest opportunity to really improve student outcomes as an innovation.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Towns. This is a question from Board Member Collins. Please elaborate on any approaches you would implement to address two large populations in our system, English language learners and special needs students.
So for English language learners, what we have found in our district and in my analysis of data statewide in Tennessee, that the key is how do you accelerate students to be proficient in English? Many times English learners become, frankly, as strong as native English speakers once they get to language proficiency. Unfortunately, we find that we have too many students, though, who take 5 to 7 years, we call them long-term English learners, to get to language proficiency so that they're able to actually operate in English. And so that is a real challenge. And so we've been thinking a lot about in Hamilton County, how do we shorten that time frame? How do we have intensive supports for students to try to get them to acquire the English language as quickly as possible? And so we've been thinking about that in terms of having what we call a newcomers center, a newcomers academy, where we might shelter students for the first year being a recently arrived student in America, and that in that first year there is intensive language support, wraparound supports, and they're in a cohort model where they are doing all their core academic class with other English learners, and then that they are a part of the whole school when it comes to their actual electives in the non-core academic classes, and being able to extend that year into a summer program. So you might have a student, if we're able to identify them, if they got here in the summer before they enroll in school, we would have an early start that captures them in that newcomer center. They go through the school year, and then we go through a summer after that first year, where it's all about intensive language supports and being able to get those students to speaking English and at least being able to operate in the school environment in English as quickly as possible. When it comes to students with special needs, we have been focused on making sure that we have appropriately inclusive education settings. And so we need to make sure that all of our students with special needs get exposure to standards-based instruction, and that there is a tight partnership between the special educator and the general education content teacher. We've been looking at all variations and continuum of co-teaching models, where you have a special educator and a general educator who are working together to make sure that that student gets exposure to the general ed curriculum and as much exposure as possible with the support of both as a team. And so that can range from making sure that the special educator and the general educator plan together to actually having them in a full team teaching environment, where the special educator is actually in the classroom, where the students with IEPs are also in the classroom, and the special educator and the general educator are actually going back and forth to support that gen ed curriculum with the specialization of the special ed educator being there. So I think that that partnership and thinking about the continuum of co-teaching practices and trying to lean into inclusive education settings where we have as much exposure to the general education curriculum as possible is the way that we can support students with special needs.
Ms. Ware-Jackson.
Thank you. Dr. Towns, children are the main customers of school districts, but as we strive for higher test scores, we often ignore customer needs that interrupt learning when left unattended. How are expert recommendations on some basic needs of K-12 students, such as adequate sleep time and play time, social interactions, and attention to behavioral health issues, considered in designing a plan for improved test scores and graduation rates?
I think that looking at the social emotional needs, that sleep time, playtime, behavioral health is critical to improving student outcomes in terms of achievement. We cannot keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. We've got to approach this differently, and that means we've got to focus on whole child development. The By All Means program consortium that I mentioned is really at the heart of this, looking at students and trying to figure out how do we design a school day. How do we support students? How do we plan in terms of looking at the whole child and identifying what those non-academic needs are and being able to match students with community resources to be able to support those needs? When you talked about sleep deprivation, we have considered things that, this is going way back, right? We took nap time out of school, right? And so we've considered, particularly in low-income communities, what would happen if we structured a school day that was an 8 to 5 school day, but not 8 to 5 learning time, right? We still have the 6.5 hours, but think about being able to have built-in breaks for students, where there is a brain break time, where there is a nap time if you need it. And think about the flexibility that you could give educators in terms of planning time. If I had an 8 to 5 school day, but only 6.5 hours of instructional time, I would have 2.5 hours of release time for my educators. What would an educator do with that time? For all of a sudden, they too could take care of their needs and be able to actually do things like have a dentist appointment in the school day that didn't take away from instruction, or be able to plan more deeply to support students and their differentiated needs. So when we've been talking about looking at the whole child and social emotional learning, we've been looking at that on the teacher staff side too. There is a lot of research around building resilient schools, and resilient schools mean that you've got healthy, whole children and adults in the school. So I think thinking about the school day differently, being able to proactively identify those non-academic needs of the students, building strong partnerships with community partners where there's shared accountability for students being able to show improvement on both academic and non-academic domains. That's the way that we're going to approach the work differently, and that finally we're going to be able to really attend to the needs of students who need all of those supports that you named in terms of that mental, social, emotional, behavioral health that keeps them from being able to engage in learning at high levels.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Towns. This question is from Board Member Dyson. Through the years, we have experienced a very large exodus of middle-class families from our EBR school system. We have created additional seats in our dedicated magnet schools and in our gifted and talented programs, which help provide options for some, but many want traditional neighborhood schools with stellar offerings close to home. How would you prioritize addressing these needs so that every family and taxpayer feels that we have the right fit to offer them? How would you reach those who have totally given up and are either disengaged and wouldn't bother to consider us, or those who are downright angry?
So I think that this conversation around how do we keep and attract middle-class families to our public education system is one that we're all wrestling with. And look, so much of what's happening in terms of the choices that parents are making and where they are choosing to attend is about, frankly, branding, promotion, marketing, communication. And if we as a public school district are going to get the attention, which is at the first level, just have people actually come into the doors and look at our schools, we've got to be attuned to that, and that we've got to update our thought around our communications team, around our marketing, and around branding a public school district. And a lot of people feel like, oh, this is just fluff. But frankly, if you don't get people to actually even take the first look, then there's no way that they're actually going to choose you as a public education provider. So we went through a complete rebranding process in Hamilton County Schools, where here similarly we have 30% of children who are opting into private schools here in Hamilton County. And so we felt like when you look at what private schools are doing around their marketing, advertising, and their outreach to families, that we've got to respond to that. We can't just assume that people are going to check out their neighborhood school. So what that means is making sure that we do promote and package what we have to offer, and that we elevate that for parents to know what it is that we're doing. Because I'll be honest, I would put most of our public education programming up against so many of these schools that parents think are better options, but we don't give them good enough tools to know what are indicators of quality. So we have to define for parents what is quality, and then we have to show them that our offering is quality, because otherwise people are going to make assumptions about quality that are actually erroneous. And quality is not just about the neighborhood that the school is in. It's not just about who's in the car line when school lets out. Quality is about the teaching and learning that's happening in the building. We don't do enough, I don't think, in public school systems to promote the focus that we have on teaching and learning the qualifications and the talent of our staff, what our children are able to accomplish, all the things that you hear private schools talking about in terms of where their kids go to college and what kind of ACT and SAT scores they get. We have that. We have that in spades. We don't talk about it in the same way to promote. So I think that that's got to be one of our first options. When you talk about families that may be angry or that have checked out, I think that with a new superintendent and a new administration, there is an opportunity for a reset. And I certainly would hope, if I'm ultimately selected in this role, that the school district would partner with me to go to our community and have them give us a second look, have them hold us accountable for the work that we say we're going to do, have them participate in that listening and feedback around that first 100 days, and get everybody excited about the potential and bring people back to the notion of public education is frankly one of the greatest institutions in America and what distinguishes us.
Thank you, Dr. Towns.
Yes.
Ms. Bernard?
I have to do 2 unmutes. Sorry about that. Great answers, Dr. Towne. This question is from Board Member Goday. Improving academic performance starts at an early age. What are some successful strategies you've seen in early childhood education from pre-K through 4th grade to improve academic achievement, particularly in reading proficiency that can be applied in EBR?
Yes. So yes, learning does start early, and I think that we have to start engaging with children and families as quickly as possible. In Hamilton County, we have a relationship where we partner with community resources around the birth to pre-K continuum, and particularly birth to 3. So I think that it's important that as a school district, we make sure that we stay in touch with those birth to 3-year-old providers, and that they understand what the expectations are for kindergarten readiness, and that they can be making sure that they're providing the kind of developmental opportunities all along the way in our daycare centers and early learning centers that prepare children for when they get to kindergarten and what we're going to be expecting in terms of their academic needs. When it comes to some of the strategies in pre-K through 4th grade to help students be successful, I really think that it's about, and a lot of folks have now begun to focus on two issues: knowledge building and exposure to knowledge, and that's knowledge of the world, right? The basic science concepts of how we interact with the world, being able to expose kids to as much background knowledge as possible, what we call schema. So building that knowledge at an early age, and then phonics. Right, you know, at some point, people it fell out of favor, if you will, in education circles to have explicit phonics instruction. And now we have all of this great empirical research that shows that explicit phonics instruction is critical for students to be able to master decoding and reading, and then being able to build that comprehension skill based on that background knowledge. So it's not an either or, right? We cannot, in particular, you find this in schools that have challenges with achievement, you don't give up social studies and science to focus on reading and math. Social studies and science is reading and math. If children aren't being exposed to all of those holistic concepts about the world, then there's no way that they can make meaning out of what they're reading and comprehending. So I think those 2 strategies from pre-K to 4, background knowledge building, exposing kids to all of the knowledge about the world that they're living in, and then building that explicit phonics instruction, that's how we build strong foundations for literacy.
Thank you, Dr. Towne.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Towns. We have about 10 minutes left. 6 o'clock is the scheduled end of the interview. Many different areas have been discussed during today's interview. Is there anything you would like us to know about you, or was hoping the board would ask but did not?
So do I have the opportunity, is this my last opportunity, or will I have an opportunity to ask questions even after this?
You'll also have a chance to ask a few questions, all within the next 10 minutes.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. So let me say this as my closing statement, so make sure that we have time. I really thank you all for your time today, and I thank you for considering me to become the next superintendent of East Baton Rouge Parish School System. If I am ultimately selected for this role, I fully commit that I will bring my passion, energy, and talents to the task at hand, which is ensuring that all children in East Baton Rouge have access to a world-class education that opens doors to a bright future. Together, we can do this by building a culture of excellence and equity that brings all communities to the table and holds us all accountable for student success. I have talked to many stakeholders to better understand the community's needs and aspirations. And the more I have learned, the more I want to be part of this journey with you. I know that the mission will be challenging and we face great uncertainty. But my life's path has prepared me well for a time such as this. I have often talked to my mother about how compelling I find this opportunity in East Baton Rouge. And I hope that my mother would be proud of the way that I have represented myself here today, and the way that I've represented our family. My mother, always the optimist and my biggest supporter, keeps telling me that she has a good feeling about East Baton Rouge. And to be honest, I have a good feeling about it too. And I hope that you all will agree. It would be my great privilege to work for you all as the elected school board, as your superintendent, and work together with the community to chart a path that dramatically improves outcomes for all students in East Baton Rouge. I look forward to the next steps in this process. I look forward to meeting you all in person and being able to engage with the East Baton Rouge community. Thank you.
Thank you. And are there any questions you'd like to ask the board?
We have 10 minutes, and so I really just have one question, two-parter. As the board, what is the thing that you're most proud of about East Baton Rouge? And then what are your biggest priorities for a new superintendent? What are the top one or two things that you want a new superintendent to accomplish?
Board members?
So I'll go first. I think the thing that I'm most proud of is that this school system is a school system that educated me and gave me an opportunity to reach the pivotal points of my success that I am at now. I went to an East Baton Rouge Parish school from Head Start all the way up until 10th grade. So East Baton Rouge has served as the foundation for me as a board member and now as in my professional career. I think my priority is specifically being someone who utilizes this system as a success gateway is to make sure that more students who come from the neighborhoods that I serve have that same opportunity to utilize success through education in our school system. So prioritizing Black male graduation within our school district and just graduation rates in general for impoverished students. So those are my priorities and what I'm most proud of.
Great, thank you.
I'll go next. I'll hopefully brief. I'll just say my family, both my wife and my family are from this area, and we have large families. Spend a lot of time, know a lot of people in Baton Rouge, and you'll find that a lot of people in Baton Rouge are from here and you know, enjoy LSU and the good food and the friendly people. So I think family and people in general are what I'm most proud of in Baton Rouge.
Priorities for the next superintendent?
I'll let somebody else take.
I'll speak. What I'm most proud of, not being a native of Baton Rouge, but I've been here since my college years at LSU. All of my children, my 3 daughters are all graduates of EBR. So, you know, I've been deeply entrenched in the school system for a very long time through either PTOs and, you know, all of the ladder, so to speak, through K through 12. And my priority is around the lower performing schools. You know, we've spent a lot of time and energy, and we're very proud of our magnet and our gifted and talented programs. But the majority of our students are in the schools in the neighborhoods, and you know, we're looking for quality. Many people are looking for quality programming in neighborhood schools, and we want our schools in our neighborhoods to thrive. We want all of our schools to be A schools. So, you know, that's my priority, is attending to the needs of the children in the lower performing schools, and a plan to get that done.
Thank you.
I'm most proud of our students, our educators, and our administrators, and the hard work and effort that they put forth on a daily basis to do the work of education. My priorities are for the superintendent would be to bring our stakeholders, internal and external stakeholders in the community together, and to lead all of us to excellence.
Okay, Dr. Towns, we thank you for coming today and for your interest in our school district. Once we conclude this round of interviews, we plan to invite a few applicants and spouses and significant others, if they so choose, to engage in a follow-up interview. Our consultants will be in contact with you regarding the next steps. Thank you for your interview time, and have a good evening.
Thank you all. It was great meeting you virtually. Good
Thank
night.
you, Dr. Towns.
It's great to meet you, Dr. Towns.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.